Okay, hello. We are here with another podcast. This time we're going into the interesting season finale. Now, just a quick heads up, I'm probably going to have to go pretty quickly with this one. We'll see if I actually hold to that. But right now, I'm currently staying in a room where if the AC is not on full blast, it becomes unbearably hot. And the issue is that the AC is incredibly loud, so I couldn't put you guys through that. You would barely be able to hear me. That's how loud it is. And the desk from which I can record at is right next to it. So yeah, well, the things I do for love, to quote our boy Jamie Lannister. Anyway, I feel incredibly conflicted about this episode, this finale. On the one hand, as an episode itself, I found myself thoroughly enjoying it, thoroughly entertained. There was a ton of great action and cinematography, a ton of great acting, and a lot of the writing elements were good too. But the more I let it simmer and think about it, it's just kind of more of its issues have kind of come into my head in the days since, if you will. Yeah, there's a lot of problems here. I think that I've talked about this on previous podcasts, but the whole George R. R. Martin toxic butterfly situation is it was justified. I think we're seeing now just because of how much I think George has read season three scripts at that point and how much they have simply deviated from the book for the sake of deviation. Like, it's not like Game of Thrones where they're skipping big chunks because they don't know what's going to happen later and they don't know how to adapt it. It's essentially they have the full story laid out to them, handed to them on a silver platter, and they're actively choosing to make changes and deviations that create toxic plot holes later. Like right now, I think my biggest concern, and I had this feeling right after watching the episode, I was like, solid episode, fun episode. How are we going to wrap up this story in 8 more episodes? We have one more 8 episode season. Like, for context, at this point, we're probably about like the 60% mark of the story. Like, we still have, and if we were realistically going through, we'd be like pacing wise, we'd be over the 75% mark, probably closer to 80 because of the condensed seasons. And if I had to estimate, we're at like 60% of the way through the story. There is still so much that has to happen that it is physically impossible for them to fit everything into 8 episodes, which leads me to ponder and wonder what exactly it is that they're doing because they changed so much around and swapped so much around this season. Like the episode, there was a lot in this episode that was pretty much book accurate, and there was a lot that was not. And then the last episode was completely like not original, like nothing from the book. So it's like, where are they going with this? Like, what are they trying to do here? And I'm very curious, I guess, morbidly curious at this point to see where it goes. Because when we watch seasons one and two, I kind of had the stance that sure it has some issues here and there, but overall it's still a fantastic show, one of the best ever, absolute masterpiece. Season three is kind of a mess, but it's a lovable mess, if that makes sense. Like I'm still thoroughly enjoying it, thoroughly having a great time, and love the show, but it's not. I can't say what I'm watching is like not an absolute mess of writing, if you will. So, with that out of the way, I think we can dive into the specific substance of the episode. I want to talk about, to start, sort of Rhaenyra in general and her character overall, because I think actually how they've handled her is incredibly well and incredibly faithful to the book. Now, we should have seen this coming, sort of, because Fire and Blood released like what was it, like 6 months before Game of Thrones season 8, the final season of Game of Thrones, and I think George was definitely sort of rough drafting what he wants to do with Daenerys's descent, with Rhaenyra. And the thing about Game of Thrones is that it handled it so poorly, where she went from like incredibly selfless altruistic hero in into like Targaryen supremacist Nazi Aryan villain genocidal villain in half an episode. What I really like about House of the Dragon and Fire and Blood, the book that's based on, is that Rhaenyra's descent into villainy is slow. Like, she's always had issues. She's always had some Targaryen elitism and some of that supremacy complex and some entitlement too. But I think that's something that's inherent to being born and raised in that environment. And I think that's pretty much unavoidable just because of the way she was raised. It doesn't justify it, but if you think about it, even the best of Targaryen rulers like Jaehaerys, like you read through the lines, he had major issues too, and he was considered the best king, and I think that, Rhaenyra goes from someone that has problems but is ultimately like the better choice in trying to do good to someone that fully, loses the grip on the humanity she had and descends into villainy to a point when her story plays out from this point on. It's such a tragedy because it's like you can see that there was this like good and desire to be a good ruler in there that's kind of just completely, you know melted away and like wither that slowly and slowly until now, when you could see like this was kind of I think Aegon being known to return in the show, and I'll get to that in a second, is the straw that broke the camel's back for her and just sort of made that shift. And I think it's not like Game of Thrones where there was like a few straws that broke her back in half an episode. This was like straw after straw after straw after straw building up until finally, like literally the expression, it broke the camel's back. So I actually think her descent is handled incredibly well, and it's really tragic to see, and you can see like on Mizaria's face in the crowd that like, yeah, this is the person you thought you were loyal to is gone. Like she's and it's sad because like if Damon were back there watching that, he was the only one that would have supported this, and he wasn't even there. Um, so, but yeah, I think she's an incredible character, and I think the show is actually doing her a lot of justice in conveying the complexities of her character. Because I was actually worried about this. I was worried about, while watching season two, everyone was like so pro Rhaenyra, and even early this season, that I was like, and the Black faction pro, I'm like, the point of the story is that there's, everyone is capable of good and everyone is capable of evil, and there's no one side over the other that's good versus bad. It's like it's real history essentially, and it's shit on both sides. And I was worried that like when people see how Rhaenyra is sort of, I don't know if the word is becomes a villain, but becomes a villain, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I was worried how people react, but I think the show's doing it a tremendous amount of justice, so I'll give it a lot of props there. Um, but the interestingly though, the way that they handled the Aegon review, like her finding out about Aegon, is kind of, how do I approach this without giving spoilers? I guess what I'll say, and I said this in past podcasts, I'll get to it again. At this point in the story, Aegon is completely off page. Once he flees King's Landing, he is MIA. No one knows what's going on with him, and it's not recorded on page until probably what will be the second half of season 4. And then his story picks back up again, and you get hints of what he was doing during the meantime, but you don't see it. And I think the thing is, like, having characters know he's around and doing things in that gap kind of ruins the story later. There is a lot that needs to happen later, and this is why I think they're just essentially going to do an entirely different original story next season, which I'm about. But there's a lot of things that can only happen in the story because no one knows Aegon is alive or around where he is, if that makes sense. And having people know he's alive and operating on that knowledge makes, if they're going to adapt the story tree, it makes it not make sense later. So I don't know what they're going to do that. But she says a really good line when she's sending off Daemon, and she said, Rhaenyra essentially says, like, do not make a monster of me. And that the irony of the episode is that she does it herself soon after that point, and also like Daemon ends up doing it anyway. I mean, through Ulf, because essentially she created a monster in him. Um, Yeah. So let's talk about Ulf. Yeah, I mean, we all the book readers knew this was coming. That he was essentially, going to betray both sides and just cause absolute devastation. And it's sad because all these characters have lost touch. Like Ulf is fed up and Snap getting abused from both sides, so he in his head is like, "Yeah, fuck you too. I'm going to attack both sides. I'm on my own agent." But you don't think about it, he's killing the innocent small folk that he came from, essentially. It's not his city, but like, you think anyone in the bar that he was schmoozing with at the beginning of the episode survived that? Probably not. And it's like his whole roots of becoming coming from the small folk and being fed up with how the royalty treats them, you know, he's now the one that went and burned innocent small folk, and it's just such a ironic twist to his character, I'm interested to see what they're going to do here, um, for the rest of his story. All I'm gonna say is I think I know why they're keeping Gwen alive. And like for book readers, if you just know, I think they're going to give Gwen the Caltrops plot, which I thought they were going to give to Orman and Bull John Roxton, but I don't think they're going to do that. I think they're going to give it to, they might give it to Bull John Roxton because they're trying to make him a character now, even though they didn't do that before. But I have a feeling they're going to give that to Gwen, and that whole plot with Ulf will probably go to him. But I'm not going to say anything about that plot any further because of spoilers. So that's my guess about what they're trying to do. Because for context, Gwen was in King's Landing when Rhaenyra in the book was in King's Landing when Rhaenyra took the city in the beginning of the what would have been the beginning of the season, and he dies in that situation. So he's not even around right now. So everything he's doing now is completely show original. Um, yeah, and essentially to sort of go back to Rhaenyra quickly. Well, let me focus in on Rhaenyra right now. I'm sorry, I'm a little scattered. It's just it's a very stressful time right now, and I'm trying to record this in the little time I have. So let's go through all of the Rhaenyra points right now. Focus on her as a character. So she has the confrontation with Bela, and she has a later conversation with Helena, and both kind of hit her in her core, where they're like, you're you're not a good person. Essentially, you're a selfish person when people aren't essentially being your bitch and doing whatever you want, and especially when people aren't giving you the results that you want, you turn against them and you treat them like shit. Like like Adam and Bela were like dedicating their lives to finding Vagar, and the fact that they didn't find, like, I mean, like, she should be okay. I see how hard you're working. I see what you're doing, and she's just like, is resents them for not finding it. Like, even though it's not their fault, and no, both Belial and Helena make, like, and Helena has a really good speech where it's like everything you care about is ugly, like I care about beautiful things in life, and like, and she says such a potent line, is there nothing more to life than you than not die, or something. I can't remember like exactly what it's word, but it's like, is there nothing more to life than you than not dying? And that's such a good line because it really hits to the core of Rhaenyra's ethos at this point, why she dismisses Missouri. A lot of people are confused by this. I think I get it. I think she realized, like, with Aegon being back, and she realized like how much shit was happening, and her Master of Whisperers, Missoria, was not reporting any of it. The pregnancy, Lena pregnancy, Aegon returning, all the shit happening in the city. Damon had to handle that. Like, she was doing none of it. Like, what was she doing? So it's interesting because I think it's an issue with the writing of the show where Missouri feels incompetent in the show when in the book she is absolutely not. She is a genuinely genius, like conniving, manipulative master of whisperers, like on the level of like Varys and Littlefinger, and like the show just kind of makes her almost look like dumb, you know? It's a little weird. So but I think the show did that in order to justify her dismissal in this episode. Um, I have a theory, it's a crackpot theory, that they're going to be combining her character with a character known as the Shepherd. That's supposed to be introduced pretty soon in the story. I thought for sure they'd be introduced in this season, but I understand why. I have a feeling that's what they're going to do, and I think that would be a really cool, interesting approach. I'm not going to spoil anything with that, but for her to, she gets sent away and be set to go to, is it Pentos, one of the free cities over in Essos, and she like slips away in the chaos, and is staying in King's Landing where she has her whole network and everything. And it's I could also see her collaborating with Sylvie and going down the Game and Pale Hair plot from the book. That could be happening. But also, how many plots are we going to do from the book? Because we have 8 episodes left, and we have, I think, like I looked it up, it's like 300 and something pages of the book left to adapt. You know, like where, like it just hits me, like where are they going to end the show? Like, are they go? I don't want to spoil anything. um, so Rhaenyra, like, she essentially contradicts everything she worked, and this is why like Mizrahi gave that face in the crowd. But, like, she essentially contradicts everything she's worked hard for in the season. That whole like positive image of her handing out food. She goes back to the same spot and surrounds herself with small folk, and she's just dressed completely in like, it's definitely meant to evoke on the Conqueror. That like militaristic, like villainous energy. Like it looked awesome, don't get me wrong, but like, yeah, she was, and she starts her like Nazi Aryan speech. So she gives Joffrey the, the road, the lowdown on the Song of Ice and Fire prophecy in the carriage, which, um passing on that message, she gave it to Jace, was it last season or season one? I can't remember if it was season 1 or 2. But what's weird is that she goes and she essentially loses it and goes on this like fascistic tirade speech in front of the small folk, and she starts like slipping into old Valerian too. Like it literally was supposed to be very reminiscent of like Nazi speeches, and except instead of the crowd being like, yeah, woo, it was like the crowd's like, what the fuck is going on? And she starts like going off about like Azor High to the crowd, and they're like like how are they, and she starts like slipping into old Valerian, and then it's like, how could they possibly know like what she's on about? She just looks like a crazy psychopathic, and she is so lost in her own head that she like sees herself as this hero when she's really, she looks like a crazy psychopathic tyrant. And now you can sense the vibe like shift into the city where everything's boiling over and brewing, and it's like chaos is about to ensue. And yeah, it's just, it's like, it's very well done, Singer Descent. And of course, this is all in the aftermath of her going in and essentially murdering the Pope, as everyone is memeing. But she kills the High Septon, which this does not happen in the book, because the ramifications of something like that are absolutely astounding. It would literally, like, someone made equivalent. It would literally be like Trump going to the Vatican and murdering the Pope in front of everyone and walking out and saying like, I'm your new religion now. That's literally the equivalent of what happened in terms of like, that would be outrageous. Like, like, so I'm very interesting to see how they handle the consequences of that, because that specific moment is completely book original. And I think that also will probably tie in. So maybe they won't give Missaria the shepherd plot. I don't know. Maybe they'll give it to someone related to that. I don't know. I'm just speculating out loud, essentially. But yeah, she has like, Alan goes on a complete like shift for her. He's like a full like loyalist right now. Like she like totally like is like, yeah, like don't listen to these guys. Like you're the blood of old Valeria too. Like we don't answer to them. Like we answer to our own higher power. Like we are the gods. And he buys it. He like snaps. He like buys into it. Like he is purely Rhaenyra loyalist through and through, which is not really an element of his character in the book. So I'm interested to see how they handle it. Like he is like a loyalist and he does his duty, but he's never like, you could tell he's not like a Rhaenyra fanboy. He's like, he's just doing what he has to do. It's more out of duty than true loyalty. This felt like it was almost like he's like almost buying the sauce. Um And also he's like they're creating this plot where he's becoming distant with his brother, Adam, which is not a thing in the book. I don't remember. It's been a little while, but I don't remember them having any sort of beef. I thought they were always kind of aligned, but I could be mistaken on that. So I'm interested. It's been that the love triangle and this loyalty. See, I'm kind of just going through all of the King's Landing stuff right now. So yeah, of course, she comes back to the castle to find Helena killed herself. And God, the ending of the episode is done incredible. We're just jumping to the ending right now, is done incredibly well. Helena's suicide is a big moment from the book, and people were very worried about how they were going to handle it. And I've been kind of bouncing back and forth about whether they did it well. In the book, it's left ambiguous as to why she did it, what like the straw that broke the camel back for her suicide was. There's a few like theories that people propose. They think that so in the book the difference is that she already has the child. And this was kind of the core of the toxic butterflies like rant that George went on, but she already has the child, and the child is smuggled out when Rhaenyra takes King's Landing, and then the child is killed like incredibly brutally and gruesomely on the road, um at Tumbleton. And that's part of why the whole battle thing ensues. And that was kind of a thread that they take the title to so that something happens there. That's kind of a thread that kind of fell off the show. So it makes like Tumbleton a little bit less significant in terms of as like a battle target. Like that's why it's just like there's just so much talk. Like George was right about the talk, like there's so much things that are like not able to work now. And a lot of the people speculate like in the story that Helena killed herself because of that loss of her child, which makes sense. But it's also she's riddled with prophecy, things like that. A lot of people think Mazzaria might have killed her, like might have pushed her. That's another thing. People, maybe she knew something that she didn't want to get out. Like we don't actually have a concrete answer of that in the book. It's up to interpretation of what happened. So I think the show handled it well, where like she comes to terms with that, like she's never she sees the future, she sees what's happening, and she knows she never has a chance of getting out of here. So why would she endure her and her child to that fate? She's like, well, if I can see that this is like my rest of my life is misery and suffocation and danger, like why would I possibly like stick around for it? And so it kind of makes sense in that sense. It's incredibly tragic because she's like such an innocent, like good character, and the fact that like this is how she has to go, it's just sickening. And that whole, you know, but Allison seeing like I don't know if this was intended to be like a working thing where she warged into butterflies or just a symbolic thing. Like Allison knows, you could tell she knows. Like God, how Allison gonna be now with Rainier with when it's like, Rainier promised her like if you go on this mission, I'll watch over Helena, and now she's gonna come back and Helena's dead. Her last like connection, her last hope is dead. And what's gonna happen from there? It's just awful. Like really, I love Helena as a character. So it's like just seeing it, it's just crushing. And it was actually the exact spot that Tom in Game of Thrones jumped out the window. I think if you match, I think people did that where they matched up the window skyline, and you can actually see it's the exact window, which is that's such a George thing to do. I don't know if that was what actually happened in the book because it's not specified which windows. The Tommen thing didn't happen in the books yet, but I think it's going to, but it didn't happen in the books yet. So we don't know, but like I would have a feeling that's a Georgism that he gave them, that it's the same window. But yeah, so Rhaenyra takes the, tapestry that Helena was knitting, and she sees essentially the city on fire, dragons all just dying, and Rhaenyra on the throne covered in blood. What kind of omen is that? you know? Um it's really cool knowing what's going to happen, like, seeing how the tapestries, like, sort of convey that, like, from that perspective, but, like, yeah, Rainier was like, "Oh, fuck," like but I think she's so deep in her psychosis now that it's essentially she's like, "Nope, I am, like, not gonna, like, not gonna entertain it." Um, so before we go over to the Tumbleton battle, because I do wanna touch on some of the stuff with that, we get a backstory for Alice Rivers, and I don't know how I feel about it. Um, it's interesting. So essentially, the backstory we get, which we don't get in the book. I talked about it in this previous podcast, but Alice Rivers' story is like it starts in Fire and Blood. But there's supposed to be a sequel coming out. I don't know if it'll ever come out, given George's writing like writing issues right now. But there's supposed to be a sequel, probably called Blood and Fire, where that was supposed to finish Alice River's story. She was like her story starts in this and doesn't finish. So I wonder if we would have gotten her backstory then, and maybe George gave him this backstory, or if it's an entirely fake backstory. I think there's a very high possibility that she could be lying about it. So I think, but it's an interesting story that she was Heron the Black, who's the creator of Harrenhal. He's actually an Iron Islands lord that took over a lot of the Riverlands before the conquest and essentially built this massive castle called Harrenhal to be his headquarters. And then Aegon the Conqueror came, burned him to shit. And so essentially she was like either the wife, I think, of or a concubine of Heron the Black. I don't know if she loved him or was like a slave, because it could have been like a salt wife situation, because he was from the Iron Islands, where essentially a slave wife. But I don't know for her, but essentially she lost her child in that, and she was so mournful that she made a deal with probably the Children of the Forest, the Green Men, something along that lines, to sort of bring him back, but it didn't work, and she found she couldn't die, you know, and that was the price she paid. There's always a price for magic in A Song of Ice and Fire. So it's interesting because I don't know whether to believe her. I don't know if this is a manipulation for Aemond or if this is actually genuinely her backstory. It's interesting to be getting an Alice Rivers backstory if it is indeed real, because that's something we didn't have. Now it's concrete on the page. So it's interesting. I don't know how I feel about it. So quickly, I want to the whole scene with Aegon showing up to see Aemon at Harrenhal was like the "I'm alive" delivery was like I was dying. It was like out of a comedy movie, but that scene does not happen in the book. Like Aemon and Aegon do not have contact at this point. Aemon does not know what's going on, nor does he probably care what's going on with Aegon at this time, and Aegon does not know what's going on with Aemon at this time. Like they're two completely severed fault lines, and I don't know why he actually should have. I thought it was going to be a vision. I 100% thought it was going to be a Harrenhal vision dream thing, but it wasn't. It seemed like it was real, and what's going to happen with that, I don't know. It was weird. I don't know why they included that scene, but I think they should have just made it a vision. But now it's like, okay, I guess they made that change. I don't know why. Anyway, let's get into the battle real quick. It was very incredibly well done. Ormond using the kids as human shields, incredibly fucked up. I love how like Damon actually cared and was like, "Get out of the way! I'm not gonna burn you." Like I don't know if it was him or Rhaenyra, but he actually got genuine. And then two kids stuck behind, and he had to burn them. But it was fucked up. And there's a lot of groups in modern day that do that with use children like that way, and it's sickening to say. So before the battle starts, there's this whole proposal that Gwaine kind of tries to foster for Darren, that essentially Gwaine wants co-ruling, where essentially like Darren has some of the kingdoms and Rhaenyra has others. And of course, Damon's not having that at all. And like, there's a whole point. Do you rather have victory or an army and then like Corlys kind of tampers it and is like, you know, what was the point of Corlys getting kidnapped? What was the point of this plot? It was completely made up for the show, and like nothing happened from it. But anyway, Corlys kind of tampers it and is like, um, he had like an alternate solution. I'm totally blanking on what it was, but it was like sort of like a treaty almost, and Damon, obviously refused, and like Gwaine says a good line where he's like essentially like, would you rather have, or what do you want more, victory in an army of, or mountain of dead high towers? And you know, Damon's like, you know the answer, you know. So he's just so focused on this vengeance, you know. I don't know what's going on with Damon's character, to be quite honest, because it seemed like he had that like prophecy revelation with Alice Rivers at the end of last season, and now he's just like back to his bullshit, you know, and it's for that goal. But like, I don't know what he got out of that almost, you know. I think he saw it as not he needs to be a loyal servant to Rhaenyra, which was kind of the message of it, or for future things to play out, but rather like Rhaenyra is God, and I need to make her like ruler of the whole world, which is like really, I don't know where he got that from it, but the fact that Damon and Helena never had a conversation after she physically tapped into his vision last season is astonishing to me. Like how he not did not go to King's Landing is like, oh, I gotta talk to her. Like it's astonishing writing oversight, but yeah, even the whole proposal doesn't really work with Aegon being alive, you know, and they kind of say that, you know. And it's like how now that Aegon's like wallowing around and somewhere out there, you know, they say like how could they possibly make plans like this, you know? So it's all moot. But anyway, the battle was incredibly well done. It was filmed incredibly, very exciting. You could get the sense of the real tragedy and devastation of it. Um, you know, we get a few deaths. We get Ormond. You know, I wish they kept around Ormond longer. I know he's supposed to die here. He dies in this battle in the book, but like I was hoping they'd keep him sticking around, especially for like the Caltrops plot next season. But you know, he was such a fun character, and now he's gone. But then they kill the head of the Stark army, who's like I'm conflicted about because he just murders that kid, you know, like um but interestingly, you know, now he's dead. Who is going to take his place to lead the Stark army? We'll have to see next season. You know, because he's not actually the head of a Stark. We met the head of a Stark in the beginning of season 2, and there was a whole plot that they cut between Jason and Cregan Stark where they kind of have an incredibly strong bond, possible romance, and like Jay spends a lot of time in Winterfell getting to know the Starks, you know, and getting close with them, and that was completely cut. He was just there for like a minute of screen time in the show. So, but yeah, so Cregan Stark, it's interesting because now he's probably going to come into the show more next season, unless they completely change things from the book. But they didn't really give the introduction to him as a character. Like in the book, you know, Jace spends that time with him, you get to know who Cregan Stark is, and then when he comes back into the story, you're like, oh, it's Cregan Stark, you know. Like the show, I don't think it really has that work, so I'm interested to see how they do that. But yeah, the commander of the Stark army, he's out. He um you know, he was fun but kind of fucked up. um Yeah, and then of course Hugh, you know, was supposed to guard King's Landing. He fled. Why wasn't Hugh the focal POV of this episode? Is something I was thinking about. Like the whole emotional stake of Tumbleton was his wife being there. And, you know, obviously they have the scene she kind of finds her dead, but like he should have been the POV, not Damon, like on the street in this episode, like 100%. And why they didn't do that, and they made him like a minor background character in this episode, is like such a weird writing oversight, you know, especially with the whole context of it. Um, so I thought that was really weird, but yeah, I wonder what's going to happen there, where he's going to go, what he's going to do, because he abandoned his post for Rhaenyra. Damon saw him doing that, you know, and now also his wife died in the battle. So what's his thing going to be, and how he's going to be with Ulf, because Ulf essentially did the burning that probably caused that. You don't know, but you know, but yeah, the battle was just incredibly well done, and I thought it was a great season ender. If we weren't in the boat of how little time we had left, like if they were pacing it correctly, this should have been like episode 4 of this season. And I would have said they should have ended the season. I'm not going to give any spoilers, but they should have 100% ended the season with like, you know, the dragon pit, the night of the, what do they call it? It's the night of the three kings, whatever, you know, like that whole plot. That should have been the end of the season. 100% if they were pacing this story correctly. But the fact that now they have to fit I'm just gonna sort of say book like plot points without spoiling what they are. They now have to fit Dragon Pit, God's Eye, um, Hour of the Wolf, possibly Unwind Peak stuff, which I don't think they're gonna do, even though that's a key part of the story. Um, like that's just tip of the iceberg of what they have to fit in next season. Like there's so much they have to do next season, and like I don't know how they're gonna do it. I don't know how to do it, and I think they're just literally gonna give us an original story next season. Like I think that's what they're going for. Like I think they'll probably have like key visual set pieces, like you'll know that you know the ones if you read the book. They'll have those key set pieces, but they'll be so devoid of their context that I don't know if they're gonna work. So, I don't know how I'm feeling about the show at this point. Honestly, at the end of the season, there was just so much. Like George was 100% right about the toxic butterflies. We're in a whole new story now at this point with so much has changed. That they're keeping some elements of it, but overall, it's a new story with these characters, and I'm interested to see how it goes. But the fact that it's so frustrating because like with Game of Thrones, a lot of people said, yeah, they didn't have any books to adapt, but no, they chose to essentially mostly skip books 4 and 5, A Feast for Crow and A Dance with Dragons, which they could have adapted in season 5 and 6, and they did their own original things. Which to me, seasons 5, 6, and 7 were still good. It was 8 that was the only, in my opinion, the only truly bad one. But is what it is. But the fact that, but they did eventually run out of material that they could have adapted, even though they skipped quite a lot of it. Which made them run out faster. I don't know what they were doing, David. But this show, they like had a full, complete book handed to them. The story is done, beginning, middle, end, done, handed to them, and they chose like not to do it. They chose to make weird decisions, and yeah, I don't know what the drive was behind that. I don't know what's going on really, and it feels totally like a totally different show than like season 1. So I don't know in the first episode or 2 of season 2, so I don't know what's going on anymore. Anyway, I am dying. I'm covered in sweat. I gotta turn the AC back on. So let's wrap this up. Interesting season. Thank you all for joining me. I'm sorry it had to be sort of these freeform podcasts instead of the fully edited videos. We got one in there. I think it was episode 2, but I've been in the most probably busiest time of my life potentially. I'm still in the throes of like a new move, a lot of stuff, stray elements in my life going on. So I couldn't. But I'm glad I was able to, experience this with you guys and still have to be able to connect on this in some way. So yeah, there's gonna be more content to come soon. So stick around. I'm not going anywhere, even though the season's over. So thank you all for watching / listening.